All right, gang. Glad you're here this morning. Let's get started. So, as I said in the teaser, we got started that I believe that uh, behavior of people can be either a great example of what to do or a great warning of what not to do. And if we're honest with ourselves, we serve both of those roles. Both at times we do things that are great examples, and other times we do things that aren't so much. And I just have a few personal stories to tell you to really, I guess, exemplify some of the principles that I want to share with you this morning that I think that, well, they've been important ones for me to recognize for my personal growth and for my success and going out and serving other people, but also that, hopefully that as I share these with you, that not only can you relate, but that it's a reminder of the importance of these particular principles. We could talk about many things. There are many things we could talk about success and personal development, but these three things in particular have been some of the most important ones. So the first one that I want you to write down, if you're taking notes, please write down this statement: be more curious and less judgmental. Be more curious and less judgmental. And this concept is really more about humility versus ego. Are we going to behave with a great deal of humility, or are we going to let our ego control? And as I think about this, and I think specifically about the story I'm going to share with you, it was about wanting to appear to having it all figured out, or feeling more confident than I was, or really just, I guess, having it all figured out. And I guess it's also about being careful to not prejudge people, because that's really what I did in this situation. It was about me prejudging someone. So let me just share with you this story. It was 1992, and I had just made a road trip from Salt Lake City, Utah to Birmingham, Alabama. I was in Alabama attending law school. And if you've ever been to college or maybe law school, and I'm assuming that they do this with other graduate level programs, they will have an orientation day. And at the orientation, they'll bring all of the students who've been accepted to the program into one room, and they will talk about what we should expect, what you should expect. And one of the things they said is that look around, because a full, and I don't remember what the number was, it was something like 80%, it was a very large number, but like 80% of the people in this room will not be here by the end of the year. And I thought that was interesting. And I won't go into that particular story, but I can tell you I was one of the 80%. I was not there to start the next year, but that's not the purpose of this story. I remember at that orientation observing this one person. He carried himself very confidently. In fact, I thought very arrogantly. I watched him, how he interacted with people, the way he dressed. I criticized the way he dressed. As I observed him, he looked like, I guess, John Travolta to me, and he looked like John Travolta in the movie Grease or in the movie Staying Alive. I mean, he just had this like Italian-esque air to him, right? And I'm watching this guy, and he was so smooth. I just watched him, how he would talk to people and smile like it was on cue. It was all rehearsed. It was all practiced. It was not genuine. I watched this guy, and I thought, what a jerk. I can't believe that this guy thinks that the way he behaves is cool, that it's going to get him somewhere. That was what was going through my mind. I thought, I would never want to get to know this guy. There's no way in Hades that I would want to get to know this guy, because he just is not a genuine person. That's what was going through my mind. Well, the orientation was coming to an end, and for whatever reason, this guy approached me, and we talked for a minute. I don't even remember what we talked about. I had dismissed the conversation, quite frankly, but he had said something about, maybe we should get together, hang out, maybe study together. I think that's what it was, study together. And I said, yeah, sure. But in my mind, I'm thinking, there's no way in hell I'm going to do that. So orientation ended. Next day, we started classes, and I would see him around every once in a while, and he would say hi. And it was probably about a month into law school. I had moved into this garage apartment. It was above a garage in this old house in the woods in Birmingham. And if you've never been to Birmingham, there are woods everywhere. It's just thick, thick, thick woods. And this house was amongst these woods. And it rains constantly in Birmingham, and it's wet. And I'm living in this garage apartment above this garage, and it's humid and it's wet in there. It's tough to get warm in there. And I remember going to my closet one evening to put my clothes away. I'd done some laundry, and I was kind of shifting things around in the closet. And as I started to shift things around, I noticed that all of my clothes that were in contact with the side of the closet or the back had mold, this disgusting black mold all over them. And I'm thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? What am I doing here in this place? And I pull all my clothes out, pile them up with the expectation that I'm going to wash them. And I took the clothes that were clean and did not put them in the closet because I didn't want them to get mold on them. And then I decided to go to bed. And as I pulled the sheets back, the blanket back on the bed, this is true, cockroaches all over inside the bed. So this was my living circumstance. This is what I was living in. And what is interesting is the very next day, I ran into that person, and his name is Bobby. I ran into Bobby, and he said, hey, just small talk. He said, how are you doing? And I said, well, not too well. And he said, why? What's going on? And I said, well, I discovered last night that the apartment I live in has black mold everywhere and cockroaches. He said, oh man, that's too bad. That's disgusting. He said, well, you know what? He said, I have an apartment that I'm staying in. It's I've got extra space, you know, I mean, and you'd have to get a bed, but he said, I've got extra space, and, you know, you could share the place with me and just pay partial rent. And when he said partial rent, that, you know, made me a little bit nervous because I couldn't afford much. Well, come to find out, as I looked at the apartment, it was great. It was like the Taj Mahal. It was clean. I felt like I was staying at the Hilton or the Marriott compared to some flea bag motel with cockroaches and black mold. But what is interesting, and the reason I share this story with you, is that I decided to become roommates with this man, Bobby Christine. And I've known Bobby now for nearly 30 years. We became best of friends as we spent that 1 year in law school. And that person that I thought that he wasn't even close. I had used, for whatever reason, my past experiences of others and my perception of others, and blanketed that on him. I had signed him those terms, those meanings, that persona, which is very interesting. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is I want to ask you this question. Do you find yourself being more judgmental? Do you find yourself being less curious? See, if I'm honest with myself, that I try every day to be more curious and less judgmental, and yet I'm human. You're human. And that was a great example, I guess, not a great example, but rather a warning of the importance of that principle. I'm very grateful that Bobby didn't give up on being interested in getting to know me and being friends with me. Not only because Bobby's become a very good friend, and we've spent a lot of time, great times together, the family's spending time together, him traveling to Utah, me and my family traveling to Georgia, where he lives, but also how important that relationship was as I was 1,900 miles away from home. My grandfather had just passed away. He was my second dad. He was supposed to go on that road trip with me. And he was unable to do that because 2 weeks prior to us leaving to go on the trip, he died of pancreatic cancer. So when I had gotten to Birmingham, Alabama, I was distraught. Quite frankly, I was depressed. And obviously I was very judgmental. And I really believe that that Bobby Christine was put into my life for a reason. Not only because I was going through some very difficult times emotionally, but financially as well. My family didn't have a lot of money, and I was there on whatever money I could borrow from the federal government with student loans and grants. And there were times where I didn't have the money to pay rent or to buy food. And I didn't think I was going to get emotional about this. I haven't thought about this for nearly 30 years, but Bobby was there at times to make certain that I had the money to pay the rent, and also simply to have food. He would go home on weekends to his parents' home in Georgia, and his mom would stock him up with all sorts of great Italian dishes, and he would come back with those dishes, and we would put them in the freezer, and then he would share those with me. So I'm just going to ask you this question. Do you find yourself being more judgmental? And more specifically, what relationships are you missing out on or not building as a result of being more judgmental and less curious? See, if I really examine what was going on in my mind nearly 30 years ago on that day in orientation, and the things that I said about Bobby, it was all fear-based. It was all ego-based. And having that sort of thought process and that pattern controlling is very destructive. Obviously, you think about the way I perceived him and what I thought he was, and he was exactly the opposite of that. So I guess what I would say is, yes, the principle is be more curious and less judgmental, but be very aware of the way in which you're thinking. Because see, the most important conversation that we all have is the conversation we have with ourselves. And this conversation that I was having with myself as I was interacting with Bobby was one of great prejudice and being very judgmental. And fortunately, Bobby was not affected by it. Maybe he didn't perceive it. I don't know what. But nevertheless, it did not affect Bobby's interest in getting to know me and forming what has been a nearly 30-year relationship that I am very, very grateful for. So the next principle that I want to share with you is this. And if you are taking notes, write this one down as well. It's I really want to know. I really want to know. So my question for you is, do you really want to know? You might say, well, what do you mean, John? What do I really want to know? Anything, but particularly as it relates to getting to know people. Do you really want to know them? I mean, you know, so many people get into the business of real estate because they love homes. They love architecture. They love being in nice homes. They love land. They just love, maybe they love construction. They love decorating, all of those things. Well, I've come to understand that that's what real estate is not about. It's not even close to about that. That real estate is about people first and foremost. And so my question for you is, do you really want to know about people? Are you really interested in people, or is it just a means to an end? Is it just a process? Because really what I'm talking about is your ability to connect with people. Let me just share with you this story. This, for me, this exemplified the importance of being interested in people and really wanting to know, not just simply asking questions because it's in the script, but asking the questions that are in the script because they are the right questions to ask. I mean, I want to challenge you. How many of you say, well, I don't like scripts because they seem inauthentic? It's not who I am. I would never say it that way. I would never do it that way. You know, I do my own thing. I say my own things the way I say those things. But do you really want to know? See, I believe that you can use a script, something that isn't quote unquote yours, and make it yours. And the way you do that is by really being interested in people and really wanting to know. So let me share this story with you. I remember going out on a listing conversation many years ago. And as I sat down and started to have the conversation, you know, I like to use the word conversation for the listing presentation because I don't really think it's a presentation, because that, again, that makes it something that it shouldn't be, a process. I don't think it's a presentation. I think it's a conversation. And I'm having this great conversation with this gal, probably in her mid 40s. And I asked her, I said, so what is it that what's caused you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? And she said, well, I'm in the Army. And I said, oh, great. You are. What do you do? Or what's your rank? And she said, well, I'm a major. I work in logistics. I said, very cool. That's awesome. Thank you for your service. She said, you're welcome. And I said, well, so you're in the Army. And so explain to me what's the cause of your decision to sell? What's happening? And she said, well, I've been in the military, in the Army, for a little over 20 years now. I can retire. And I want to retire, and I want to go down to New Mexico into the Red Rocks, and I want to make pottery. I said, you want to make pottery? I said, that's interesting. How did you get into that? Well, she explained to me that when she was a kid, that she was in school and she took a pottery class, and then just connected with the teacher and really got into this. And since she was in junior high, she just fell in love with, she's passionate about pottery. And she said, what I want to do is I want to go down to New Mexico and I want to open up a pottery studio, and I want to teach other people how to make pottery. And she could see on my face that I was really interested in this, and that I was blown away that here's this woman who had worked serving her country for over 20 years, had this idea when she was young that she was passionate about, of making pottery, that she had decided she was going to open up a pottery studio, and she had finally started to begin to realize that dream. She was taking the first step to making that happen. And I told her, I said, this is so cool. I said, rarely do I see people who are making the move because they had this dream when they were young, and they are taking that step to realizing that dream. I said, because people sell their homes for all sorts of reasons. I said, this is really cool. I said, congratulations. She said, thank you. And, you know, I could see that she was really happy that I was interested in what it was that she was doing and why she was, you know, selling her home. And so I started to take the conversation to the next level, started to ask my next question. And she said, hold on, time out. And she said it the way you would expect a major in the Army to do. It was like with a great deal of authority, very abruptly, hold on, time out. And I looked at her like there was something wrong. Like, oh, what did I do? And I said, is there a problem? And she said, no. And I said, well, you said time out. What's going on? And she said, you know, it's interesting. I have interviewed 2 other agents at this point, and neither one of them asked me that question or really discovered what I was trying to accomplish. I mean, they knew I was moving to San Diego, or excuse me, to New Mexico, but they didn't discover all these things. And she said, quite frankly, and they didn't seem to really be interested in me at all. It was about just simply getting the listing. I said, well, thank you for observing that. I said, I really am interested. I said, I think it's fantastic that you're realizing your dream. I think it's very cool. And I said, and I'll, you know, I want to help you. And she said, well, that's it. I want to ask you a favor. And I said, well, Dominique, what's that? She said, would you be willing to list my home for me? And when she said that, I jokingly looked at my watch and I said, I don't know, I'm really busy. Let me check my schedule. And I had a laugh, and she looked at me seriously, and she was serious. She said, would you list my home? And I said, well, of course I would. That's why I'm here. But that moment, that conversation taught me a great lesson. The lesson was that I need to demonstrate my interest in people, that I really want to know that this business is not about a transaction. It's not about a process. It is about people. And so my question for you is, as you go about your business, whether it's prospecting, lead generation, or following up, or presenting to people, having these conversations, in other words, doing your job, do you really want to know, or is it just simply a process for you? Now, what I got to believe is that for most of us, that we really do want to know, but there are times where, yes, it's difficult to have that curiosity and to really exhibit and show that interest in that curiosity, because it is a job after all, and it's easy to get into just the process of doing the monotonous, tedious things, the rote repetition, making another call, knocking on another door, handling another objection, listening to somebody else's problems, right? And to get disconnected with that, because it takes a lot of emotion and energy to do that, to stay engaged. And yet, it is so critically important, as exemplified in what I learned by that conversation with Dominique so many years ago. So the only thing I would ask you is that when you are having conversations with people, whether it's in real estate or out, do you really want to know? Are you asking questions of them? Are you giving them an opportunity to share their story? Ladies and gentlemen, the number one human need above all else, with the exception of food and water, basic sustenance, is our ability to be validated, to be recognized. That is what I did for Dominique. I recognized her. I gave her an opportunity to tell her story. And as a result, she began to feel a connection. She began to feel safe. And she went so far as to suggest that I was going to be doing her a favor if I listed her home for her. Now, how cool is that? How cool would it be that every time you sit down with sellers, they think that you're doing them a favor by listing their home? The third thing that I want to share with you, the third principle, is this, and write this one down. Everyone has something to teach me. Everyone has something to teach me. I remember it was about probably 8 years ago, probably 8. I was at Whole Foods, and I was sitting in the dining area of Whole Foods. Oftentimes in Whole Foods, you'll find that they have kind of a deli area where you can order sandwiches or food, and then sit in the dining area and eat in the store. And one day I had done that for lunch, and I was sitting there by myself in the dining area, and there weren't but a few people in the dining room. And about 3 tables away from me, probably 20 feet or so away from me, is this man that I had noticed as I was walking past him to my table. And as I'd walk past, I noticed that he had these books splayed out all over this table that was large enough for 4 people to sit and eat. And he looked like he was probably in his early 70s. And I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of cool. Here's this guy in his early 70s, and he's got these books out, and you could tell that he was studying. And I thought, that is really cool. And I sat down, and I'm looking across the tables over to him, and every once in a while, we would make eye contact. He kept looking over at me, and I kept looking over at him. I kept looking over because I was just interested that here's this guy who, ostensibly in his 70s, is sitting there looking at these books and studying. That here's a guy who believes that it doesn't matter how old you are, something to learn. And we kept making eye contact so many times that I finally got to the point I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I got to go over and introduce myself. So I walked over to the guy and just simply introduced myself. I said, hi, my name's John. He said, hi, my name's Lennox. I said, what are you doing here? I walked past you and I noticed you've got all these books. It looks like you're studying art. What is it? He said, well, it is. It's Japanese art. I'm studying Japanese art. I said, that is really cool. I said, just out of curiosity, you don't look like you're old enough to have served in the war. And when I said the war, I meant World War II. And I said, but did you serve in one of the wars? And he said, yeah, actually, I served in the war. And I said, well, when people say the war, they mean World War II. I said, you're not old enough to have served in World War II. I said, so which war did you serve in? He said, no, I served in the war. And I said, you served in World War II? And he said, yes. I said, that's not possible. You're not old enough. And he said, actually, I am. He said, I just turned a buck. The man had just turned 100 years old just a couple of months before I am standing there having a conversation with him. And if you had seen him, if you were there with me, you would have been blown away, because the guy looked like he was no older than 72, 73 years old. Very robust, very bright, sharp, just amazing. There he is in front of me, acting like the guy is 30 years younger than he actually is. I said, well, wow. I have to tell you, I'm amazed, because you don't look to be 100 years old. I said, so what is it you're studying? He said, well, it's Japanese art. And I said, well, why are you studying that? He said, well, actually, I have a PhD in Japanese art. And he said, I taught at San Diego and then also at the University of Utah. And he said, I'm just continuing my studies. I said, that's really cool. I said, what did you do in the war? He said, well, because of my expertise, I was considered to be probably the foremost expert of Japanese art in the United States. He said, so I was tasked by General Douglas MacArthur to go in with him. I was basically his right-hand man to make certain that we logged and protected and just kind of made certain that the Japanese art in the process of bringing hostilities to an end was protected. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no. I said, you literally worked side by side with General Douglas MacArthur. And he said, yeah, I did. I was blown away. Well, we continued to talk for a few more minutes, and the guy was just really friendly. And he said, you know what? He said, I'm leading an expedition this October to Japan to just go and visit the various sites of Japanese art. He said, you should come with me. I said, really? He said, yeah, come with me. I said, okay, I will. So we exchanged information, and it was about, I guess, 3 months, 4 months later, he got sick and unfortunately was not able to go on the expedition. He canceled it. And then about a year later, the next summer, he passed away. His name is Lennox Tierney, if you care to look it up. I believe it's Tierney. He received the highest recognition or honor that anyone could receive from the Japanese government as a foreigner. And he received that for the role that he played during World War II in protecting and understanding and studying Japanese art. Phenomenal story, guys and gals. I am so grateful that I was moved at that moment to just simply get up and have a conversation with this man. So the question I have for you is this: do you look at anyone and everyone as someone who could teach you something that you could learn from? You know, I was having a conversation yesterday at breakfast, and the waiter walked up to ask what we wanted for a beverage to start breakfast. And what was so interesting was the way in which this guy communicated. He was very happy. He smiled. He seemed very, very interested. He was very forward. And he was also very grateful. I want you to think about all these words. He was forward. He was kind. His eyes were bright. He was grateful. He just exuded this great positive energy. He said, I just want to thank you for coming here and supporting this business, especially during these trying times. And when he said it, he was so genuine. And it was a great reminder to me as I sat there and listened to him of the importance of the way in which we communicate with people. So I go back again to the question of, do you look at anyone and everyone as someone who could teach you something that you could learn from? See, I believe that it doesn't matter if they're a server at a restaurant or a PhD who worked with General Douglas MacArthur during World War II. They all have something to teach us. So my question for you is this: do you look at people that you have an opportunity to interact with as someone who will teach you and that you learn from them, that you set aside your ego and say, what can you teach me, regardless of your position, your success in life, where you are? Look, guys and gals, just to sum it up, be more curious and less judgmental. Learn from people. Set aside your ego. Be humble. and recognize that every person that you come in contact with, there is an opportunity to learn. The second thing would be this, is to be genuinely interested in people, to really want to know. See, the best part of this business and in life is that we have the opportunity to connect with other human beings and to begin to serve them as a result and help them. In other words, connect with people. See, learn from people, connect with people. And then the final thing is this, is to, look, get outside of your box. Everyone has something to teach you. Be willing to look at anybody you come in contact with and say, what could I learn from them? See, the server, Ishmael, I remember his name yesterday, just this idea of being happy, of being grateful, and of letting people know that. I have to tell you, he set my day off right, sitting there and listening to him and just looking at this joy that he had and the fact that he was excited doing his job. Get outside of your box. Everyone has something to teach you, regardless of what role they play in life. So I hope that these stories have been not only interesting to you, but have been great examples of these principles. Be more curious, less judgmental. Really want to know, be curious, really want to know. And then recognize that everyone has something to teach you, regardless of where you are in life. All right, guys and gals, let's finish this up with some closing affirmations. Have a great day and a great